Pain registered first, clinical, methodical. Velix mapped each sensation with detached precision. 3 fractured ribs, a dislocated shoulder, multiple lacerations, and most critically, the 3.7-ton concrete support beam pinning her lower body to the laboratory floor. The emergency lights flickered weakly, casting eerie blue shadows across the wreckage of what had been the most advanced xenobiology research facility on Delta Station. Valix's silvery eyes, adapted for the dim light of her homeworld, scanned the devastation. Her slender 6-fingered hand reached for the medical scanner at her belt, its screen cracked but functional. Atmospheric integrity compromised. She whispered to herself in the lilting, clicking language of the Ashuri. Estimated oxygen depletion in 37 hours. Communications offline. Probability of detection by standard rescue protocols, 12.3%. The earthquake had struck without warning. Unprecedented on this tectonically stable planet. The irony wasn't lost on Valix. She'd spent 5 years studying Earth's geological anomalies, only to be trapped by one. Her pale blue skin, normally luminescent with health, had dulled to a sickly gray as her body diverted resources to essential functions. Above, she could hear the whir of rescue drones scanning the wreckage. Their algorithms were searching for human life signs, not Ashuri physiology. The beam crushing her would register as just another piece of debris on their scans. "Computer, activate emergency beacon," she commanded, her voice steady despite everything. The small device at her wrist blinked feebly, its power reserves compromised. Like everything else in this facility, it had been designed for human use and hastily adapted for Ashuri biology. Inadequate, like all human technology. Velix closed her eyes, calculating odds she didn't want to face. The humans would prioritize their own. She was the only Ashuri on the research team, tolerated for her expertise but never truly accepted. Chief Medical Officer Valix Tiari, renowned for pioneering cross-species trauma care, would die alone under tons of concrete on a planet not her own. The thought brought unexpected emotion, not fear of death, but a strange, hollow regret. In 15 years of working alongside humans, she'd maintained her cultural distance, viewing them as primitively emotional, dangerously unpredictable. Now, she would never understand what drove them to acts of seeming irrationality. Hours passed. The pain intensified as her medi-patch depleted its analgesic compounds. Twice more she heard drones overhead, then silence. Through a narrow gap in the rubble, she glimpsed stars appearing as night fell. The evacuation would be complete by now. Any remaining rescue operations would resume at daybreak, focused on recovering equipment and research data, not searching for an alien medical officer assumed dead. A soft tremor shook loose debris around her. Aftershock. Valix tensed, expecting the final collapse that would end her wait. Instead, distant sounds penetrated the silence. Scraping, shifting. Probably automated recovery units beginning salvage operations. The sound grew closer, more erratic than a drone. More determined. Valix's beacon gave a sudden pulse, stronger than before, as if responding to proximity. Something, or someone, was approaching from the west quadrant, the most unstable section of the collapsed structure. Statistically improbable. Tactically unsound. A beam of light pierced through a small opening in the rubble, blinding after hours of darkness. The shaft of light wavered, found her face. Behind it, through the choking dust, she glimpsed 5 fingers, not 6. Human skin, not azure blue. "Hello." The voice was hoarse, male, disbelieving. "Is someone alive down there?" For the first time in her career, Medical Officer Valix Thierry found herself speechless as hope, that most irrational of emotions, flooded her system like a drug. Jace Holloway had never been good at following orders. Not in the military, not during his consulting work for interplanetary construction firms, and certainly not now when the evacuation commander had explicitly forbidden any return to the collapsed research facility. "Structural integrity 0%, she'd said, No life signs detected. We're not risking more lives for corpses. Yet here he was, 16 hours after the main quake, picking his way through the Western Quadrant's ruins. His exosuit, a outdated TE-47 model borrowed from the maintenance bay, whined in protest as hydraulics strained against shifting debris. A hairline crack ran along the helmet's faceplate, not immediately dangerous, but a constant reminder of his mortality. Just another bad decision to add to the list, he muttered, wiping blood from a gash above his eye. The aftershocks were increasing in frequency. Each one could trigger a complete collapse. Jace had been inspecting the facility's foundation when the quake hit, a routine structural assessment that had saved his life by placing him near an emergency exit. He'd escaped with minor injuries and a crushing sense that others hadn't been so lucky. Something on his scanner pinged, faint, irregular, not matching standard emergency beacon frequencies. He adjusted the settings, trying to filter out interference from the damaged power conduits. There it was again, a pattern too regular to be random, too irregular to be mechanical. Someone's alive down there, he breathed, recalibrating his direction finder. The signal led him deeper into the unstable ruins. Twice he had to backtrack when passages collapsed ahead of him. Once, he nearly fell when flooring gave way beneath him. The exosuit's power reserve dropped to 43%, enough for 4 hours if he didn't use the enhanced strength functions. A sudden aftershock sent him stumbling against a partially collapsed wall. Pain lanced through his side, a previously cracked rib now fully broken. The suit's medical system deployed a pressure bandage and pain suppressant, buying him time but clouding his judgment. The pain grew stronger. He was close. Jace began clearing debris methodically, calling out every few minutes. No response came. The suit's power reserves dropped to 29%. Then he saw it, a flash of dull blue beneath a massive support beam. Not human skin. Ashuri. "Hello," he called, directing his light toward the alien form. "Is someone alive down there?" Two silvery eyes reflected his light back at him, pupils contracting to thin vertical slits. "You should not be here, human." The voice was weak but precise, each word carefully formed. "This section is structurally compromised. Probability of total collapse, 64%. Jace laughed despite himself. "Good to meet you too. I'm Jace Holloway, structural engineer. And you're alive, which means I'm exactly where I should be." "Medical Officer Valix Thierry," she responded. "Your presence is unexpected." Jace assessed the situation quickly. The concrete beam pinning her weighed at least 3 tons. The exosuit could handle that at full power, but not at 29% and declining. "Can you move at all?" he asked, already clearing smaller debris around her. "Negative. Lower extremities immobilized. Internal injuries extensive but non-fatal if treated within 12 hours. Another aftershock rattled loose material around them. Jace's suit alarm blared as a section of ceiling collapsed nearby. "We need to move quickly," he said, positioning himself at the edge of the beam. "When I lift, you'll need to pull yourself out immediately. I won't be able to hold it long." "The mathematical probability of your success is negligible," Valix stated. "Your exosuit lacks sufficient power, and human musculature, even augmented, cannot sustain the required force." Jace grinned through his cracked faceplate. "Good thing I'm terrible at math, then." He diverted all remaining power to the suit's hydraulic system. Warning lights flashed across his heads-up display as safety protocols were overridden. "On 3, he said, bracing himself. 1, 2, 3. With a roar of exertion, Jace heaved upward. The suit's joints screamed in protest. Pain exploded across his back and shoulders as human muscle supplemented failing machinery. The beam rose, just inches, but enough. "Now," he gasped. For one terrible moment, Valix didn't move. Then, with surprising speed, she pulled herself forward, her blue form sliding out from the deadly weight as Jace's strength began to fail. The suit's power cell died with a high-pitched whine. The beam crashed down, missing them both by centimeters. Jace collapsed beside Valix, the now-dead exosuit, a prison of metal and carbon fiber. His breathing came in ragged gasps, blood trickling from his nose and ears from the strain. Valix stared at him, genuine confusion in her silvery eyes. Why would you risk structural collapse and physical injury for an unknown alien? Through pain and encroaching darkness, Jace managed a smile. Because where I come from, we don't need a reason to save a life. As consciousness slipped away, he felt cool, six-fingered hands carefully examining his injuries. The touch of a healer, not so alien after all. Valix had treated hundreds of human patients during her career, but never under such primitive conditions. Her emergency kit, partially crushed but functional, contained supplies designed for Ashuri physiology. Adapting them for human use required all her expertise. Your fourth and fifth ribs are fractured, she informed Jace as she applied a bone-stabilizing gel to his torso. The exertion caused minor ruptures in several blood vessels. Without proper medical equipment, I can only provide temporary support. Jace winced as the gel hardened. Feels great. Very soothing. It is not designed to be soothing. It is designed to be effective. She paused, studying his face. That was humor, wasn't it? Humans often employ sarcasm during stress responses. Got it in one, he said, attempting to sit up. We need to move. This section isn't stable. Valix gestured to her lower body. The bleeding had stopped, but her legs remained limp and unresponsive. I cannot walk. My spinal connection is temporarily severed. It will regenerate, but not for approximately 17 hours. Jace assessed their situation. The exosuit was dead weight now, its systems fried from the power surge. He began unlocking the joints, freeing himself from the metal shell. Then I'll carry you, he said simply. Valix blinked, a gesture that rippled across her bioluminescent markings. That is not possible. Ashuri bone density is 2.4 times that of humans. I am significantly heavier than I appear. Jace finished extracting himself from the suit and moved to her side. Then we'll go slowly. But we're going. Before she could object further, he'd fashioned a sling from the suit's emergency webbing and hoisted her onto his back. Her weight was indeed substantial, but his determination proved greater. They moved through the ruins at a painstaking pace. Jace's breathing grew more labored with each step, but he refused to rest for more than brief moments. Valix found herself studying the impossible contradiction of human frailty and resilience. The evacuation ships will have departed, she said as they paused beneath a partially intact archway. Standard protocol allows no delay for missing personnel after seismic events of this magnitude. There's always the emergency shuttle in the north bunker, Jace replied. It's deeper underground. Might have survived. A 27% probability. At best. Jace laughed softly. You really do quantify everything, don't you? It is the Ashuri way, she responded. After a moment's hesitation, she added, though I find it has limitations when applied to human behavior. Your actions, for instance, defy logical calculation. Is that your way of saying I'm special? Another aftershock interrupted them, stronger than the previous ones. The archway above cracked ominously. Move, Valix cried, her voice sharp with unexpected emotion. Jace lunged forward as the structure collapsed behind them. The motion sent them tumbling down a debris-covered slope, landing in what had once been the facility's central atrium. Sunlight streamed through a massive hole in the ceiling. They lay there, stunned by the fall and the sudden brightness. Valix's sensitive eyes narrowed against the glare, but she found herself reluctant to look away from Jace's face, now clearly visible for the first time. Blood and grime couldn't disguise the strength in his features, the determination that had driven him back into this death trap. His eyes met hers, and something passed between them, a recognition that transcended species and training. You're bleeding again, she said, reaching toward a fresh cut on his forehead. "Worth it," he replied, his gaze never leaving hers. "I can see a path to the north bunker from here. We might actually make it." As he helped her up, their hands remained linked for a moment longer than necessary. Valix felt her bioluminescent markings pulse, with an intensity that had nothing to do with injury or stress. "The shuttle requires two-handed operation," she said. "One pilot, one navigator." Jace smiled, understanding the unspoken offer. "Good thing there are two of us, then." With renewed purpose, they continued their journey through the ruins, each supporting the other, no longer simply alien and human, but survivors united against impossible odds. The emergency shuttle bay had indeed survived, sealed beneath 20 meters of reinforced concrete. Jace managed to bypass the damaged security protocols, granting them access to the small craft that represented their only hope of escape. Velix eased herself into the navigator's chair, her injured legs still useless but her upper body functioning at peak efficiency. Her six-fingered hands moved across the control surfaces with practiced precision. "Pre-flight diagnostics show minimal damage," she reported. "Fuel cells at 82% capacity, sufficient for atmospheric escape and rendezvous with the evacuation fleet, assuming they maintain standard orbit." Jace settled into the pilot's seat, wincing as his broken ribs protested. "That's our first bit of good luck. Let's hope it holds." As they worked through the launch sequence, an uncomfortable silence grew between them. The immediate danger had passed, allowing other considerations to surface. Valix found herself distracted by his proximity, by the unfamiliar emotions his presence evoked. "I have observed," she finally said, "that humans often form temporary bonds during crisis situations. Your neurochemistry encourages attachment to those with whom you share dangerous experiences." Jace's hands paused over the controls. "Are you saying this is just adrenaline and oxytocin?" "I am acknowledging biological realities." He turned to face her fully. "Is that how Ashuri explain away feelings? By reducing them to chemical reactions? We do not explain away. We understand the evolutionary purpose of emotional responses." She hesitated. "But I find my understanding insufficient in this instance." The shuttle hummed to life around them, systems initializing one by one. Outside, dust and smaller debris scattered as the ventilation ports cleared. "In my experience," Jace said carefully, "understanding something doesn't diminish it. Knowing that stars are just nuclear fusion doesn't make them any less beautiful." Valix's luminescent markings pulsed with confusion and something more complex. "Ashuri do not typically form connections outside our species. It is considered a dilution of cultural purity." "And what do you consider it?" Before she could answer, alarms blared throughout the shuttle. The diagnostic panel flashed red warnings. "The launch tunnel is partially collapsed," Valix reported, professional focus instantly restored. "We have insufficient clearance for standard exit procedures." Jace studied the sensor readings. "If we use the emergency thrusters at maximum, we might be able to punch through. That would subject the hull to extreme stress. Probability of structural failure, 58%. And the probability of surviving if we stay." Valix's silver eyes met his. 0. The facility's power core is reaching critical instability. Jace's hand found hers across the narrow space between their seats. His 5 fingers interlaced with her 6 in a connection that defied biological differences. "Then we go together," he said simply. She didn't pull away. Together. The shuttle's engines roared to life, vibrating through the small craft with steadily increasing intensity. Warning systems screamed as Jace overrode safety protocols and diverted all power to the thrusters. Valix's hands flew across her control panel, calculating adjustments for the unorthodox launch trajectory. 3. Jace counted down. 2. 1. The shuttle surged forward, straining against gravity and debris. Metal screamed against stone as they scraped through the partially collapsed tunnel. A support beam tore a gash along the hull, atmosphere hissing outward before emergency sealant deployed. For one terrible moment, They hung suspended between earth and sky, thrusters struggling to provide sufficient lift. Then they were airborne, climbing steeply through smoke-filled skies toward the clear blue beyond. Behind them, the research facility disappeared in a bloom of fire as its power core finally failed. As gravitational pressure pushed them back into their seats, Velix found her hand still joined with Jace's, neither willing to break the connection. "Among my people," she said softly, "such physical contact is reserved for those who have formed a permanent bond." Jace's eyes never left the viewport, but his fingers tightened around hers. "Among mine, too." Above them, stars began to appear as they left the atmosphere behind. Below, the world that had nearly claimed their lives receded into distance. Between them, something impossible continued to grow. The medical bay of the evacuation ship Horizon hummed with activity. 3 weeks had passed since their dramatic rescue, yet Valix still found herself the subject of curious glances and whispered conversations whenever human crew members thought she couldn't hear. Her recovery had progressed rapidly, as Shuri regenerative capabilities restoring function to her damaged spine and legs. Now she stood by the viewport in the physical therapy section, watching distant stars drift past as the ship continued its journey back to the central colonies. "Your gait pattern has improved by 27% since yesterday," observed Dr. Elias, the ship's chief medical officer. "Quite remarkable." As Shuri healing follows an exponential rather than linear progression, Valix replied, her attention elsewhere. "Has there been any change in Engineer Holloway's condition?" Dr. Elias's expression softened. "He's stabilized. The regenerative treatment for his internal injuries is proceeding as expected, but slower than yours. Human biology doesn't respond as quickly to cellular stimulation." Velix nodded, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the concern that had become her constant companion. Jace had collapsed shortly after their shuttle docked with the Horizon. "We need to move everyone to the emergency shuttles as a precaution," he informed them. "The gravitational readings are similar to those that preceded the earthquake." Fear flickered across Jace's face, not for himself, Velix realized, but for her. The memory of being trapped beneath tons of concrete was still fresh for both of them. "I cannot leave without him," she told Dr. Elias, her tone leaving no room for argument. "His condition requires specialized monitoring during transport. There isn't time to arrange. I am the foremost xenobiological medical officer in this quadrant," Valix interrupted. "I will take responsibility for Engineer Holloway's care." Dr. Elias hesitated, then nodded sharply. "Get him to Shuttle Bay 4. And hurry." As the doctor left to attend to other patients, Jace looked up at Valix with a mixture of gratitude and concern. "You don't have to risk yourself for me again." "It is not a risk," she replied, already disconnecting monitoring equipment and preparing his transport bed. "It is a certainty." With practiced efficiency, she navigated his bed through crowded corridors toward the shuttle bay. Another violent shudder ran through the ship, sending crew members stumbling. Velix maintained her course, one hand steadying the bed, the other never leaving Jace's. They reached the shuttle as the final boarding call sounded. Inside, frightened passengers moved aside as Velix secured Jace's bed to the deck. As the shuttle disengaged from the Horizon, they watched through the viewport as gravitational forces began to tear at the larger vessel. Emergency ships scattered in all directions, seeking escape from the unexplained phenomenon. "It's happening again," someone whispered fearfully. Velix looked down at Jace, finding unexpected calm in his steady gaze. Whatever came next, they would face it together, no longer alien and human, but simply two beings who had found each other against impossible odds. "Among my people," she said softly, for his ears alone, "the traditional response to Javelis is a promise. My life expands to include yours." Jace smiled up at her, 5 fingers still entwined with 6. "I like that better than 'till death do us part." Around them, the universe continued its chaotic dance of destruction and creation. But within their joined hands lay something both ancient and new, a connection forged beneath rubble and strengthened by stars. My life expands to include yours, Jace whispered back. And in that moment, Valix knew that some impossibilities were meant to be.